Good afternoon, all. It's your friendly neighborhood Dani. Not quite in the neighborhood anymore, but here to answer your questions about Unit 5. Pretty much all of them had to do with Hitler and your most recent lesson. So we're going to focus on that. And we're going to go ahead and start off basically in chronological order. And we'll just get through stuff as it happened. So um, some of you guys wanted to know a little bit more about Hitler and what happened with the Beer Hall Putsch. How did Hitler come to power in the Nazi Party, and all of that. So I'm going to share just a little bit with you. First of all, Hitler was so we know that he fought in World War One, right? He actually won. He earned a couple of medals for some acts that people saw that were brave. All right, and so he ended up earning the Iron Cross second class, and then he ended up earning the Iron Cross first class. Which he ends up wearing, as we can see here, for pretty much the rest of his life. He wears it everywhere. He's very proud of it. We'll come back to this guy in a second. But basically, he's wearing that, and he is no longer obviously fighting because the war is done, but he's still working for the military. And so the military is aware that there is this group, the Nationalist German Workers' Party, right, that is actually forming and starting to get, it's a very small group, but it's starting to cause some trouble. And so they send Hitler in kind of undercover to find out what the heck is going on. Hitler actually decides that he doesn't want to report back to the army anymore. So he tells basically like stops working for the army and becomes a Nazi. And very quickly rises to power within the Nazi Party itself. It's still very small at this time, but he is very charismatic, and the leaders at the Nazi Party at the very beginning of the Nazi Party are not particularly strong leaders. So he takes advantage of that. And Hitler, it's very important to remember that Mussolini is starting in 1919, 1920 to gain a lot of power and a lot of attention in Italy. And Hitler is very inspired by Mussolini. So he's very much wanting to, even though Italy was on the other side of the war, right, he's very much wanting to emulate Mussolini's fascist ideas and fascist ideologies. So basically, what ends up happening is a couple of years into being part of this Nazi Party, the Nazis plans a coup d'etat, right? So they plan this rebellion. They want to take over. They want to take over the government, and they do this with the help of a certain guy, the name of General Erich Ludendorff. He doesn't look particularly. He doesn't look particularly pleased. But this guy actually was a really famous general in World War I. He won like one of the top medals you could win, and really was like a celebrity pretty much at this time. And so General Erich Ludendorff was very displeased with the Weimar Republic, and he didn't like the democracy and the way that the government was set up. So he really was nationalistic. He wanted a nationalist government, and he was very um, pro fascist, pro Nazi ideology. So basically, he and Hitler lead this beer hall putsch, this coup d'etat in Munich, and try to take over the government there. Well, obviously, we know that didn't go well, and Hitler and his men were like completely shut down. Erich Ludendorff, because he is so popular and a World War I hero, is basically, he's not punished at all, right? Basically, people decide like, oh, we can't, he's too popular, we can't punish him, right? But they basically do a slap on the wrist to Hitler, put him in jail for 5 years, even though he's literally committed treason. And then some of you were asking, why did he only serve 9 months in jail when he had a 5-year prison sentence? Well, again, that's because of this guy, Erich Ludendorff, right? This guy was able to pull some strings for Hitler, right? Really popular guy. So and there was also many men in the court system who also didn't like the government. They were very nationalistic and sympathetic to Hitler's cause. So Hitler was allowed to have hundreds of visitors over like the 9 months that he was in prison. And like basically after 9 months, like he came up, they were like, oh, let's parole this guy. He's good. We're done. So after that, though, in the 1920s, things started to get a little bit better. Originally, Hitler had started getting popularity because the economic situation was so bad right after World War I. So you guys saw that picture, hopefully, in the slides of that table with all of the food on there, and all of the food together cost 1 million marks, right? So imagine if a mark was $1, and all the food, that little bit of food on that table cost $1 million, right? There are so many pictures of people like burning marks for fuel, making kites out of marks. The kids are making kites out of marks, or building blocks out of stacks of marks. But here we have an image of a lady at a party, and she's made this dress out of marks and this party hat out of marks, because literally their money is that worthless. So basically, you had to have like 1 million marks in order to feed your family for like half a week. So you might as well you can do anything with your money because it's worthless. Basically, what they started to do is they started to go to the store and like, here, I'll trade you food for like fixing my shoe. Like if they went to the cobbler, a cobbler would fix your shoe, and he'd say like, here, give me a loaf of bread and I'll fix your shoe for you. Okay, so they started bartering things instead of paying with their actual money. And that's why Hitler was gaining power in the early 1920s. When he got out of jail, things had gotten much better, even just in the 9 months that he was in jail. So the Nazi parties did start to grow a little bit, little by little, throughout the 1920s, but not as much as it could have. When it started to grow was in the Great Depression. When the Great Depression hit, as you can see in your reading from today, the Great Depression hit in 1929 when Wall Street crashed here in the United States. Within just a couple of years, 1/3 of the working population was unemployed in Germany. That's over 6 million people. So Germans were really desperate, and they were very afraid that the economy was going to get back to a situation where their money was absolutely worthless, right? They did not want to get back to this situation. And so Hitler is making all of these like speeches, and basically inspiring all of these people, saying like, this is not your fault, right? It's the fault of the Treaty of Versailles. It's the fault of the Weimar Republic. It's the fault of Great Britain and France and the United States. It's the fault of the Jews, and it's all these other people, not good German people, right? And so as he is talking, right, people start to believe him more and more, and they want to believe him because he's saying things that they want to believe. And so he begins to become more and more popular. Well, by 1932, Hitler has become popular enough that he actually runs against the current president of Germany, whose name is von Hindenburg. So he runs against von Hindenburg in 1932. He didn't win, but he received about over a third of the vote. So he received almost 37% of the vote nationally, from men and women. And so if you think about, okay, how many people were unemployed, that's about over a third of people who are unemployed. And you're like, oh, okay, he got over a third of the vote. I'm not saying it's necessarily everybody who was unemployed voted for Hitler, but there could potentially be a correlation, right? Basically, President Paul von Hindenburg was super intimidated by this guy, by Hitler. And that's for a good reason, right? Because Hitler and his brown shirts were super, super violent. They beat up anybody who didn't agree with them. They were like basically like a big, huge group of thugs, and just getting bigger and bigger all the time. And so another thing too was like, even von Hindenburg's son, Oscar was an ally with Hitler. So von Hindenburg was like, oh man, this is really bad. Like even my own son is like with this guy. So Hitler basically demanded that von Hindenburg make him the chancellor after Hitler lost the presidential election. Well, von Hindenburg hemmed and hawed and like waited around a little bit, but eventually, just a few months later, in January 1933, he did give in, and he made Hitler chancellor, just because he was so intimidated by Hitler and the Nazis. And that's how Hitler basically rose to power so quickly. One of the final questions that I got from you was, what was the reason for different countries all over the world to ignore the violation of the Treaty of Versailles from Germany? That's a really good question. And it comes down to this. We're going to study a little bit more in detail after spring break, but it comes down to this. Nobody wanted another world war. Nobody wanted another world war. Everyone was still exhausted from fighting. Britain was still recovering. France was still recovering. United States was all about America first. Never heard that before. Seriously, the term was America first. US was all about that. US was all about something called isolationism. No, we're focusing on just America. We're not getting involved. All right. So basically, Hitler Hitler, little by little, could test to see how much he could get away with. And by the time people actually showed that they cared, it was too late. So, all right. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email me. Otherwise, I look forward to getting your exit tickets. I'm just looking to see how much you actually understand from this unit and see if I need to reteach anything when we come back from spring break. So please just answer as straightforward as you can. And other than that, have an awesome spring break. Enjoy those extra 2 days. And I'm going to release a few different options of things that you could potentially do, hobbies you could potentially take up during your off time, because yes, you have so much free time, and we're all stuck at home. So let's find things to do. I will be gardening. Okay, love you all. I miss you all, and I hope you have a wonderful spring break.